Face a brand new chart for the head and for the heart. It's your journey, your tools.
You know that feeling when you look at the calendar and realize a major national public holiday is coming up?
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows that feeling.
Right. If you're like most people listening to this, your brain immediately sorts it into a very familiar, comfortable box.
It's a routine.
Exactly. You see a day like Memorial Day or Remembrance Day approaching, and you just anticipate the usual rhythms.
The morning news retrospectives, the parades.
Yeah, the display of civic unity. Maybe there's a local dawn service, and then invariably it just transitions to a long weekend.
You go to a barbecue, you catch up on sleep.
You enjoy the time off. It's a synchronized cultural rhythm, right?
Yeah, we all know the steps to the dance. And, society basically expects everyone to participate in those exact steps.
We really do.
Yeah.
But today we are taking you completely off that familiar, comfortable path.
Way off the path.
Because if you're joining us for this deep dive, you are the kind of learner who wants to know what is actually happening beneath the surface of all that public theater.
Right, the real stuff.
Today, we're grounding our conversation in a deeply profound clinical research report. It's titled Beyond the Hero Myth.
It's a heavy read, but a crucial one.
Very heavy. And our mission for this deep dive is to completely dismantle that old cliche that, time heals all wounds.
Because it really doesn't. Not always.
No, it doesn't. We are intentionally stripping away the culturally ingrained toxic positivity here.
We have to.
We're dropping the jingoism.
Okay.
Instead, we are going to look with radical honesty at the raw biological and psychological reality of these days.
Specifically for the people they are actually supposed to honor.
Yeah, exactly. The veterans, the first responders, the trauma survivors.
And setting that radically honest tone right from the start is, well, it's absolutely vital.
Why is that?
Because these days are codified on our calendars to foster gratitude and a sense of national identity.
Sure.
But for anyone with lived experience in a combat zone or, in peacekeeping or severe emergency response, these days are not a holiday.
Right. They're just not.
They aren't even really a memorial in the way civilians understand the word. They act as massive, inescapable, somatic, and psychological catalysts.
I want to pause on that word somatic.
Yeah.
Because that means relating to the body, right? We usually think of a commemorative day as a purely mental exercise.
Like a memory.
Yeah, like you remember a fact, you feel a pang of sadness, you reflect. But you're saying that for a veteran, this day acts as a physical catalyst.
A very intense physical catalyst.
What exactly is it catalyzing?
It catalyzes a profound physiological dissonance. It triggers visceral full-body trauma recall and deep moral distress.
Full body, wow.
Yeah, because the civilian public expects veterans to seamlessly integrate into our modes of celebration or solemnity.
We invite them to the parade, we expect them to wear their medals.
Exactly. Listen to the bugle play the last post and just feel the same sense of restorative national pride that we do.
But that expectation completely ignores the neurobiological reality, doesn't it?
It completely ignores how the human body stores trauma. And more importantly, how the human body tells time.
It's almost like we are asking them to calmly walk in a parade while their internal biological alarm systems are absolutely deafening them.
That is a very accurate way to picture it.
And to understand why a day of public unity can be so privately devastating, we really need to look under the hood at the biology of the anniversary reaction.
Yes. Because this is a concept that is so deeply misunderstood by the general public.
Fundamentally misunderstood.
People think an anniversary reaction is just someone choosing to dwell on the past.
Right, like, oh, it's been exactly 5 years since the event. I should probably feel sad today.
Or worse, society sometimes views it as a sign of emotional weakness or like a lack of closure.
But this research report makes it unequivocally clear, right? That assumption is entirely backward.
It couldn't be further from the truth. The anniversary reaction is absolutely not a conscious choice.
Not at all.
It is not a mood you simply decide to inhabit for 24 hours. It is an evolutionary, deeply embedded neurobiological survival response.
Driven by something the report calls predictive coding.
Yes,
Huh.
driven by predictive coding in the brain.
Okay, let's unpack predictive coding, because to me, that sounds like something software developers talk about.
It does sound like tech jargon, yeah.
Is that essentially the brain acting like the autocomplete on my phone? but for physical survival.
Yes.
Like it's trying to guess what's going to happen next based on the data it collected in the past.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Your brain is essentially a prediction machine.
Okay.
It uses past experiences to anticipate future physiological needs, so it can prepare your body before a threat even arrives.
Preloading the survival response.
Exactly. And to really grasp how this works under the weight of trauma, we need to break down the architecture of your nervous system.
Let's do it.
We are looking at an interplay between three main structures: the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the hypothalamus.
I want to really take our time with these because understanding this machinery changes everything. Let's start with the hippocampus.
Sure.
What is its job on, say, a normal Tuesday?
Well, on a normal Tuesday, the hippocampus is essentially your brain's meticulous filing clerk
A filing clerk. Okay.
and a recordable hard drive. It is responsible for contextualizing your memories in both time and space.
So it gives things a timestamp.
Exactly. When something happens to you, the hippocampus takes that event, packages it, and says, this event happened in 2015, it happened in this specific city, and most importantly, it is now over.
It files it in the cabinet of the past.
Right. It explicitly tags it as history.
Okay, so the hippocampus provides the context that lets me know a memory is just a memory, not something happening right now.
Correct.
Next player, the amygdala,
The amygdala is your primal threat detection center.
the alarm.
Yes. It is an evolutionarily ancient piece of hardware. It does not care about the calendar year. It doesn't care about context.
It just cares about right now.
It only cares about keeping you alive in this exact millisecond. It is constantly, relentlessly scanning your environment for danger.
It's like a radar dish spinning 24/7.
That's exactly it.
And the third piece, the hypothalamus.
The hypothalamus is the nerve center that regulates your bodily responses. It operates via something called the HPA axis,
Which is-
the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Got it.
When the amygdala spots a threat on its radar, it doesn't wait for your conscious brain to figure out what's going on.
No time for that.
Right. It screams a warning directly to the hypothalamus.
And then what?
The hypothalamus then sends a chemical signal down the HPA axis to your adrenal glands, which sit right on top of your kidneys.
And those pump the adrenaline.
It tells them to instantly flood your bloodstream with cortisol and norepinephrine.
And that is the biochemical trigger for the fight or flight response.
Yes. Your heart rate spikes, your pupils dilate, blood rushes to your major muscle groups.
So in a normal, non-traumatic memory, say remembering a minor car fender bender from 10 years ago.
The hippocampus has it properly time-stamped.
Right.
You remember it was scary? The amygdala might log a tiny bit of emotion, but the hypothalamus stays relatively calm. Your body knows the crash isn't happening now.
But during a severely traumatic event, that entire system fails.
It catastrophically fails.
Let's walk through that failure. What happens during an ambush or an IED blast or, a catastrophic emergency response scenario?
The sheer, unimaginable volume of sensory input, the deafening noise, the concussive kinetic force, the absolute terror of an immediate life-threatening situation, it completely shorts out the hippocampus.
The filing clerk is overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed and offline.
Let me try an analogy here to see if I'm visualizing this correctly.
Let's hear it.
It's like the hippocampus is that filing clerk we mentioned, standing in a library, holding a stack of folders.
Okay.
Suddenly, a massive earthquake hits. The shelves collapse, the clerk drops all the folders, and the papers scatter everywhere, completely out of chronological order.
Yes, perfect.
And meanwhile, the amygdala is a hyperactive smoke alarm on the ceiling. It doesn't care if the fire was 10 years ago or 10 seconds ago.
If it smells even a hint of smoke.
It rings at full volume, deafening everyone in the building.
That is exactly the dynamic. The earthquake disrupts the context. Because the hippocampus was knocked offline by the sheer terror of the event, it fails to timestamp the memory as a past event.
It never gets filed away properly.
No. Instead, the raw sensory data of the memory is caught and stored primarily by the amygdala. And because the amygdala is the threat detector, it stores this memory not as history, but as an active, impending danger.
So the smoke alarm is ringing right now. Always right now.
Always right now.
Wow.
So how does this manifest as an anniversary reaction?
Yeah, how does the calendar trigger it?
As the calendar approaches a specific date associated with the trauma, like the anniversary of a deployment, or a massive, inescapable public memorial, the brain's predictive coding mechanisms kick into overdrive.
The autocomplete kicks in.
Exactly. The brain senses the changing of the season, the subtle shifts in the weather, the angle of the light, And the societal cues building up.
The news stories, the flags.
Yes. And the prediction machine says, historically, this exact time of year brings massive kinetic threat and catastrophic loss.
It anticipates the impact before anything has even happened. It's bracing for the hit.
Yes. The amygdala, which operates vastly faster than conscious, rational thought, anticipates a recurrence of the original threat.
So it hits the panic button.
It slams a button on the HPA axis, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, flooding the body with cortisol and norepinephrine, completely independent of the individual's current physical safety or conscious awareness.
Which leads to a phenomenon the report discusses called emotional reasoning.
A very powerful concept.
I found this absolutely fascinating because it explains so much about the disconnect between logic and feeling. Can you break down emotional reasoning for us?
Sure. Emotional reasoning is technically a cognitive distortion, but it's one driven by a very real biological reality. Imagine you are a veteran standing in your civilian kitchen on a quiet Tuesday morning, a week before Memorial Day.
Totally safe environment.
Totally safe. But suddenly, your body is flooded with the biochemicals of extreme terror. Your heart rate is at 130 beats per minute, you are sweating profusely, your muscles are rigid, your breathing is shallow.
Your body is basically running a marathon.
Yes. Your conscious brain feels this profound physiological sensation of mortal danger, and it works backward to make sense of it. It concludes, well, if my body feels this terrified, it is absolute, undeniable proof that a life-threatening danger is presently occurring.
The body is screaming danger, so the brain assumes there must be a lion in the room, even if it can't see one.
That's the core of it. The biological reaction creates the emotional reality.
That's incredible.
And this neurobiological anticipation explains why the anniversary reaction rarely starts on the actual day itself.
Right, it's a buildup.
The effects almost always commence days, weeks, or even months prior. The nervous system enters a state of chronic hypervigilance. Clinicians frequently refer to this state as spinning.
Spinning. That is such a visceral, evocative word for it. It implies a total loss of traction.
It is a loss of traction. It's a state of heightened anxiety, intense rumination, severe irritability, and completely disrupted sleep architecture.
Because the body won't let them sleep if it thinks a threat is coming.
Exactly. The body is literally bracing for a kinetic impact that is never going to come in the civilian world, but the brain is entirely convinced it is imminent.
But I have to push back a little here, because for you listening, this might be the most confusing part to wrap your head around.
Go ahead.
If the veteran's conscious mind knows perfectly well they are safe, they know they are in Sydney or London or Toronto in the year 2026.
They look around and see safety.
Right. They're looking out the window at civilian streets, maybe kids playing in a park. If their prefrontal cortex knows all of that, why does the body completely ignore logic?
It's a great question.
Why can't they just tell themselves to calm down?
That is the million-dollar question in trauma treatment. And the answer lies in how deeply trauma is embedded in the physical structural architecture of the body.
Below the logic center.
Far below the level of conscious logic. To understand this, we have to look at polyvagal theory and the concept of neuroception.
Neuroception.
As opposed to perception.
What is the difference?
Well, perception is a conscious act. You look at a cup of coffee, you perceive it as hot, you consciously decide to wait to drink it.
Makes sense.
Neuroception, on the other hand, is the autonomic nervous system's subconscious continuous threat detection system.
Subconscious.
Entirely below the radar of your conscious awareness. It is a biological background process constantly scanning the environment, asking one question over and over. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe?
The answer is no.
The alarms go off. And what we now know is that traumatic memories are not just cognitive. They aren't just thoughts or visual images in your head.
Right.
They are fundamentally somatic. They are literally stored in the tissues and reflexes of the body.
This goes back to that famous phrase in trauma therapy, the body keeps the score.
Exactly right. The nervous system physically encodes the sensory, kinetic, and postural realities of the traumatic event. It remembers the physical force.
It remembers the impact.
Yes. And the report highlights a truly profound example of this that blows a lot of people's minds. The role of the vestibular system.
The inner ear.
Yes. Your vestibular system is comprised of these tiny structures, the semicircular canals and the otolith organs, located deep inside your inner ear.
And what do they do?
Their job is to inform your brain about three-dimensional head acceleration and the linear pull of gravity.
So they keep it upright.
Exactly. It is the system that tells you which way is up, how fast you're moving, and keeps you balanced when you walk.
So what happens to that delicate system during combat?
During combat, this system can be subjected to extreme, violent physical forces that it was never evolutionarily designed to handle.
Like an explosion.
Think about an improvised explosive device, an IED blast. The concussive wave of a blast physically displaces the fluid in those inner ear canals.
Wow.
The vestibular system encodes the sudden, violent acceleration, the jarring concussive force, the terrifying loss of gravity during a vehicle rollover. The baseline calibration of what gravity and movement feel like gets fundamentally altered.
That is incredible. So on the anniversary date, or when they are exposed to a trigger, does the body literally replay those physical sensations?
It does. When the subconscious neuroception detects environmental cues on a day for fireworks, large compressed crowds, the low hum of military vehicles in a parade, even specific ceremonial music.
It forces the body into a defensive state.
Yes, the somatosensory system actively relives the visceral, kinetic reality of a deployment. The brain essentially hallucinates the physical sensation of the trauma.
So they aren't just remembering a blast. Their inner ear is telling them the room is actually spinning. Gravity feels wrong.
Yes. And this manifests in deeply physical ways that civilians rarely see or understand.
How so?
It manifests as unexplained chronic pain, severe gastrointestinal distress, extreme fatigue, migraines, and severe dizziness.
So the veteran might just say, I feel sick today.
But what is actually happening is a full system somatic flashback.
And the report even mentions a phenomenon called tonic immobility. It describes it almost like a paralysis.
Tonic immobility is an extreme biological freezing response.
Like a deer in headlights.
More like playing dead. It mirrors the physiological paralysis that animals and humans sometimes experience during an inescapable, overwhelming threat.
When fighting or fleeing is impossible.
Right, the nervous system basically shuts down the motor functions to play dead, hoping the predator loses interest.
Oh, wow.
On a commemorative day, the conscious mind of the veteran understands perfectly well they are standing at a peaceful dawn service, but their neuroception has detected a profound threat, and their vestibular system is replaying the gravity distortion of a blast wave.
So the mind and body are at war.
Yes. The conflict between the conscious mind saying, stand still and pay respect, and the nervous system screaming, brace for impact, can result in this terrifying temporary paralysis.
The sheer exhaustion of that.
It's immense.
That profound disconnect between what the rational brain knows to be true and what the body is violently experiencing.
Yeah.
It must require a staggering amount of energy just to remain standing upright.
It is the primary driver of the severe exhaustion, the compromised executive function, and the intense, pervasive brain fog that survivors report during these anniversary periods.
They're fighting a war internally.
Their body is literally fighting a phantom war that their eyes cannot see.
Okay, so let's consolidate what we've learned so far. We've established that the individual's nervous system is already in a state of chronic hypervigilance.
Right.
They are spinning for weeks before the actual day even arrives. Their inner ear might literally be preparing for an explosion, and their bloodstream is saturated with stress hormone.
A perfect storm of dysregulation.
Now, what happens when you take that profoundly, delicately dysregulated nervous system and force it into a nationwide, highly publicized day of public mourning?
You get a psychological paradox that is incredibly difficult for the general public to understand and often very painful for the veteran to articulate.
Which brings us to a massive pivot in our discussion, the sociological phenomenon of collective grief.
Because a commemorative day isn't just about individual memory.
It's a massive group activity.
When we look at collective grief on days like ANZAC Day, Remembrance Day, we are looking at an entire nation engaging in a highly structured, synchronized ritual of mourning.
We have shared symbols like poppies or flags, minutes of silence.
Public storytelling, wall-to-wall media coverage. And from a sociological perspective, this kind of synchronized event is designed to do something very specific for the fabric of society.
Right.
The renowned French sociologist Émile Durkheim actually coined a term for this specific group dynamic: collective effervescence.
Collective effervescence. I love that phrase. It sounds almost like a psychological champagne, a bubbling up of shared emotion.
It is a perfect metaphor. Collective effervescence describes a shared state of high emotional arousal that binds a community together.
Like the invisible electricity in a crowd.
You see it at massive sporting events or at concerts, but it is incredibly potent during synchronized rituals of mourning.
Because it synchronizes everyone.
It synchronizes the emotional responses of the participants. When a crowd of thousands stands shoulder to shoulder in utter silence at dawn, or listens to the mournful notes of the last post, their heart rates often synchronize.
Wow. Literally synchronized.
They experience what behavioral researchers call perceived emotional synchrony, or PEs.
And for you, as a civilian listener, that perceived emotional synchrony feels inherently good, doesn't it?
It does.
Even though the subject matter is sad, the shared experience provides a deeply restorative sense of national pride. It reinforces our interconnectedness. It solidifies our moral order.
It makes the terrifying reality of death and war feel somewhat manageable.
Because the grief is being distributed across millions of shoulders.
Absolutely. For the civilian population, collective rituals are a powerful technology for transforming grief into societal healing.
It connects the individual to a narrative much larger than themselves.
It provides closure, it is deeply restorative, and this is the absolute crux of the issue the report brings to light.
Yeah.
For the veteran, the trauma survivor, or the first responder, this exact same synchronized ritual has a paradoxical, deeply dysregulating effect.
This is where we need to throw out our assumptions, because there is a profound, almost cruel irony here.
Very cruel.
The exact communal ritual that is explicitly designed to heal the civilian public and bring them peace is actively, biologically degrading the physiological health of the veteran.
It is a massive sensory and emotional assault.
How so?
Think about the environment we create on these days. It is inescapable. There is constant public discourse about war, death, and sacrifice on every television channel, every radio station, every social media feed.
You can't turn it off.
No. The visual cues of uniforms, the sounds of marching, the solemn music, this completely saturated environment forcefully strips away two vital daily coping mechanisms that the veteran relies on to survive and function in the civilian world:
Which are?
compartmentalization and stimulus discrimination.
Let's define those so we understand what is being lost. Compartmentalization meaning the ability to put the trauma in a secure mental box.
Exactly. So they can do normal things like go to the grocery store, attend a parent-teacher conference, or just go to work without breaking down.
It's a necessary psychological firewall.
It is.
And stimulus discrimination. That's a cognitive skill, right?
It is. It is the ability to actively differentiate a safe present from a dangerous past.
Like hearing a loud bang and consciously telling yourself, that was a car backfiring, not a gunshot. I am safe.
Yes. But on commemoration days, the entire society is basically holding up a megaphone to the trauma.
Oh, wow.
The nation's collective mourning forces the individual's private, deeply unresolved trauma to the absolute forefront of their consciousness and refuses to let them look away. There's no escaping the reminders.
And you mentioned earlier that this degrades their physiological health. How tangible is that toll?
Very tangible.
We aren't just talking about feeling bummed out. Carrying the collective grief of a nation. What does that do to the biology?
It is highly measurable and severely damaging. Long-term psychosocial stressors and the prolonged anticipation of trauma reminders trigger significant cascading physiological changes.
Like what?
The sheer weight of a nation mourning together causes massive increases in systemic inflammation. It causes severe autonomic nervous system dysregulation.
I talked about cortisol earlier.
Right. While the civilian gets closure and a sense of unity from the ceremony, the veteran gets prolonged hypercortisolemia.
Let's translate hypercortisolemia. That essentially means their blood is just completely saturated, drowning in stress hormones for days or even weeks on end.
Yes. And cortisol is toxic in high, sustained doses.
Toxic.
Their immune system is suppressed, their digestive system shuts down, their endocrine health is physically compromised under the crushing pressure of sympathetic overdrive.
They are quite literally bearing the biological brunt of the nation's historical reflection.
The society feels lighter, while the veteran's body physically breaks down under the weight.
That massive disconnect. It makes me realize that this isn't just an issue of volume, is it?
What do you mean?
It's not just that there are too many people at the parade, or the bugle is too loud, or there are too many reminders on TV. It is fundamentally about the nature of the grief itself. It is about what the public is mourning versus what the veteran is mourning.
That is the critical pivot of this entire discussion. The civilian public is mourning an abstract historical sacrifice.
A sanitized narrative of bravery.
Exactly. The veteran, however, is mourning something entirely different, deeply personal, and often something incredibly complex and dark.
And this brings us to a critical systemic failure in how we both, as a society, and frankly, even within clinical circles, understand trauma.
Yes. We need to talk about the distinction between PTSD and moral injury.
Because reading this report, it becomes glaringly obvious that these two conditions are dangerously, constantly conflated by the public.
All the time.
We use the terms interchangeably in movies, in the news, and in daily conversation. And we absolutely shouldn't.
We absolutely shouldn't. They are entirely distinct experiences. They have different etiologies, meaning different root causes. They manifest differently in the body and mind. And crucially, they require entirely different therapeutic and societal approaches.
Wow.
And a massive portion of the profound distress experienced by veterans on or Memorial Day is mislabeled as standard PTSD when it is, in fact, moral injury.
Let's explicitly delineate them for the listener, side by side, so the difference is crystal clear.
Good.
Let's start with what we all know, or think we know. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. How is that strictly clinically defined?
PTSD is historically and clinically framed as a danger and victimization-based disorder. In the DSM-5, which is the standard diagnostic manual used by psychiatry, a PTSD diagnosis requires exposure to what is called a Criterion A event.
Meaning an event that involves actual or threatened death, serious physical injury, or sexual violence.
Correct. It is rooted in a direct visceral threat to physical safety.
Okay.
The core pathology of PTSD is rooted in the fear circuitry of the brain, that amygdala we talked about earlier, and the norepinephrine system.
The survival alarm.
Yes. It is essentially an evolutionary survival mechanism that has become maladaptively dysregulated. The primary overriding emotion driving PTSD is fear, terror, panic.
So the fundamental worldview of someone suffering strictly from PTSD is the physical world is fundamentally unsafe and unpredictable. Danger is lurking around every corner, and I am in constant physical peril.
Precisely. Their system is reacting to a world it perceives as a perpetual physical threat.
But moral injury is different.
Very different. We must contrast that with moral injury. Moral injury does not necessarily stem from a threat to your physical life at all.
Wait, really?
Yes, you could be entirely physically safe when it occurs. Instead, it stems from a profound, shattering threat to your humanity, your spiritual integrity, and your core ethical framework.
The report attributes the modern clinical conceptualization of this to psychiatrist Jonathan Shea, based on his extensive work with Vietnam veterans, and notes it was later expanded by researcher Brett T. Litz.
Yes, foundational work.
They explain that moral injury comes from experiencing what they call PMIEs, potentially morally injurious events.
PMIEs, right.
Let's break down what a PMIE actually is.
PMIEs are specific events where an individual sustains deep psychic damage because their actions, or their failure to act, or the actions of a trusted leadership structure violently contradict their internal compass of right and wrong.
It is a transgression of deeply held moral beliefs.
Yes.
The report categorizes these PMIEs into three distinct buckets: acts of commission, acts of omission, and institutional betrayal.
Let's go through them.
I think we need to give some grounded, realistic examples of each so we can really understand the weight of this. Let's start with an act of commission.
An act of commission involves the individual actively doing something that violates their morals.
Okay, like what?
This could be using deadly force that accidentally results in the harm or death of non-combatants, like civilians or children.
Oh, wow.
It could be a friendly fire incident where they accidentally injure their own peer, or it could be doing something that they fundamentally believe is evil or brutal, even if it was technically within the rules of engagement or required for pure survival in that chaotic moment.
The action itself corrupts their sense of self.
Exactly.
The burden of having pulled the trigger. Okay, what about an act of omission?
Omission is the trauma of failing to act. This frequently happens when troops are forced to follow highly restrictive rules of engagement that prevent them from intervening to save innocent lives.
So they have to just watch.
Imagine watching atrocities occur but being ordered to stand down. Alternatively, it could be a deeply personal failure. Freezing in fear during an ambush and failing to lay down covering fire for a peer, resulting in their death.
That's devastating.
It is the agonizing trauma of failing to do what you believed was your moral duty.
I should have done something and I didn't.
Right.
And the third category, institutional betrayal.
This one is massive and incredibly destructive. Institutional betrayal occurs when an individual experiences a command structure or a government that completely fails to protect its personnel.
Like a cover-up.
It could be leadership covering up atrocities. It could be politicians sending troops into unwinnable, poorly planned situations without adequate armor or support.
So it breaks their trust.
It shatters the individual's trust in legitimate authority and the overarching righteousness of the mission. They realize the system they sacrificed everything for is corrupt or indifferent to their lives.
If we compare the core emotions here, the contrast is stark. If the primary emotion of PTSD is fear and terror, what are the primary emotions burning inside someone with moral injury?
It is not fear. The primary emotions of moral injury are profound guilt, pervasive, crushing shame, deep self-loathing, moral disgust,
Heavy stuff.
and a deep, agonizing sense of betrayal and alienation. It is not about being scared of the world. It is about feeling fundamentally, irreparably corrupted as a human being.
The report uses a phrase that really stuck with me, and it feels so heavy. It describes moral injury as a dark night of the soul.
It really is.
It explains that the foundational beliefs a person holds, beliefs about their own inherent goodness or the benevolence of the world or the presence of a just God or moral universe. Those foundational pillars are irreparably shattered.
In clinical and pastoral care settings, it is frequently described not as a psychological disorder, but as a deep spiritual wound.
A spiritual wound.
The Australian Defence Force, the ADF, and the Department of Veterans Affairs actually recognize this explicitly in their literature.
Oh, they do.
They note that moral injury manifests as a total loss of faith in people, the complete avoidance of intimacy because they feel unworthy of love, and the total destruction of the belief in a just world. They refer to it as a tear in the spiritual tissue.
A tear in the spiritual tissue.
Yeah,
That changes the entire landscape of how we should look at this.
completely.
And it raises a really pointed question about treatment. The source mentions that standard cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which is often considered the gold standard for treating PTSD, relies heavily on trying to correct irrational fears or what they call cognitive distortions.
Yes.
The therapist tries to prove to the patient that the world is actually safe. But if a veteran is experiencing moral injury, isn't treating their profound guilt as a mere cognitive distortion incredibly invalidating?
It is much worse than invalidating. It can be dangerous.
You just...
It can deepen their profound alienation and actively push them towards suicide because it raises a terrifying but important question. What if the veteran's guilt is entirely accurate?
Right. The DSM-5 lists exaggerated or misplaced blame as a symptom of PTSD. But with moral injury, the self-blame might not be exaggerated at all.
No, it might not be.
It might be an entirely appropriate logical reflection of a genuine moral transgression.
Exactly. They aren't distorting reality. They really did accidentally call in an artillery strike on a civilian building.
Yeah.
Or they really did freeze and fail to save their best friend.
So you can't just CBT that away.
Treating accurate, reality-based moral guilt with techniques designed to correct irrational fear of crowds is completely fundamentally ineffective.
Because it's a different problem entirely.
You are essentially telling someone whose soul is in absolute agony over a legitimate moral failing that their brain is just misinterpreting a loud noise. It ignores the conscience entirely. It tells them their profound spiritual pain is just a software glitch.
Your guilt is just a symptom, let's medicate it or reframe it. I can see how that would make a veteran feel entirely unseen and completely isolated.
It is devastating.
And this massive distinction between fear and moral shame, it completely changes how we view their reaction to public memorials.
It does.
Understanding moral injury explains why the way civilians act on commemorative days can feel so deeply offensive, hollow, and triggering to the veteran community.
Which brings us to a really difficult part of our deep dive today.
Yes, the civilian-veteran chasm and the absolute psychological trap of the hero narrative.
This is where we see what sociologists call cultural identity dissonance reach its absolute apex. On a day like ANZAC Day or Memorial Day, the psychological chasm between the public and the veteran is vast. It's an ocean.
An ocean.
And a huge central driver of that chasm is society's uncritical, constant use of the hero narrative.
I think this section is going to challenge a lot of listeners. Because speaking as a civilian, when we call a veteran a hero, we are doing it with genuinely good intentions.
Of course.
We feel respect, we feel profound gratitude, we want to acknowledge their civic duty and their sacrifice. But the report argues that this term, while well-meaning, frequently functions as a psychological trap that harms the veteran.
It does function as a trap. To explain why, the report draws heavily on the insights of the acclaimed author and Vietnam veteran Tim O'Brien.
I know his work.
In his seminal writing on war, O'Brien articulated a harsh truth. True war stories are rarely moral, and they are almost never uplifting.
Right.
They do not instruct us, they do not encourage virtue, they are largely devoid of rectitude. War is chaotic, it is brutal, it is terrifying, and it forces young people into impossible choices where every option involves causing harm.
So when we, as a comfortable civilian public, use the word hero, what are we actually doing beneath the surface?
We are creating a tacit, deeply unbalanced, and unfair societal agreement.
An agreement.
The civilian public offers the veteran unconditional blanket praise. We give them medals, we buy them a beer, we applaud at parades.
And in return.
In return for that praise, the veteran must agree to a gag order. They must remain completely silent about the horrifying, morally ambiguous, and profoundly ugly realities of what actually occurred in the combat zone.
Wow. We're essentially paying them with applause to keep their mouths shut so we don't have to hear the ugly truth.
Essentially, yes. The hero label sanitizes the veteran's experience in order to protect the delicate civilian conscience.
Protect us from the reality.
It is much, much easier for the public to clap for a stoic hero standing in a parade than it is to sit down and listen to a young person describe the sheer terror of holding a dying friend or the overwhelming shame of having survived a firefight by hiding under a vehicle.
Right, because that's messy.
Most severe combat trauma involves profound feelings of utter helplessness and despair, not cinematic Hollywood bravery.
We think we are honoring them with the word hero, but we are actually demanding a performance.
A very isolating performance.
We are forcing them to hold the absolute darkest parts of the human experience entirely alone while we stand on the sidelines and clap.
And that structural enforced silence prevents any real communal sharing of the burden.
That makes sense.
It's fascinating to contrast this with older cultures. In many traditional indigenous cultures, returning warriors were required to share their complete, unvarnished, brutal stories with the entire community.
Right, really.
And the community as a whole bore the spiritual burden of that reality. They didn't just cheer and go home to a barbecue, they absorbed the moral weight of the violence that was done on their behalf.
That is so different.
Modern Western commemoration asks the veteran to stand at attention, keep the ugly truth locked inside their own head, and accept a label that often feels like a complete lie to them.
The disconnect is staggering. And that brings us to a specific agonizing component of this day that flares up for so many. Survivor's guilt.
Yes.
The report contrasts the internal hidden torture of the veteran with the reality of the civilian public on these specific commemorative days.
Survivor's guilt is a profound, agonizing internal conflict where an individual feels intense, crushing remorse simply for having survived when others did not.
And it's tied to moral injury.
It is intimately, inextricably tied to moral injury. On a day like Memorial Day, as the entire nation stops to formally remember the fallen, the veteran's survivor's guilt is intensely, excruciatingly magnified.
Because the civilian public is mourning abstract figures. They are mourning national history or a concept like the unknown soldier.
But the veteran isn't mourning a concept. They are mourning specific, vivid faces, their immediate peers, the person they shared a bunk with.
And as they remember those faces, they are plagued by relentless, intrusive, counterfactual thinking.
The what-ifs.
The brain endlessly loops through alternate realities. Why them and not me? What if I had tied my bootlace faster that morning? What if I had volunteered for their shift? I was a worse soldier. I didn't deserve to make it back.
They feel a massive, unpayable debt to the dead. They feel they owe their continued existence to their fallen peers, and they feel a crushing obligation to justify their survival every single day.
And while the veteran is experiencing that internal existential torture, what is the civilian public doing? The report cites a statistic that is quite jarring and honestly a bit indicting. It notes that up to 12.9% of the public views ANZAC Day simply as an excuse for leisure, day drinking, or a long weekend.
It creates a grotesque, almost absurd contrast. A public holiday atmosphere, barbecues, beach days, a day off work, juxtaposed against a veteran standing in the same town who is actively agonizing over why they are alive and their friends are in the ground.
It's just two entirely different worlds.
An existential burden of that magnitude cannot possibly be alleviated by a public parade or a stranger buying them a free beer at the local pub.
Sure.
It just makes the veteran feel more alien.
So how do they cope with this massive, painful disconnect?
They have to adapt.
The report discusses something called acculturation strategies, like Immigrants trying to navigate a foreign, bewildering new culture, veterans returning to civilian life have to figure out how to exist in this massive gap.
And the research shows that 56% of veterans report extreme difficulty transitioning back to civilian life.
Over half.
Yes. To survive that gap, they utilize psychological strategies to protect their fragile sense of self. The most problematic one, which flares up intensely on commemorative days, is called separation.
Separation meaning they maintain a rigid, uncompromising military identity and deliberately distance themselves from civilian culture.
Exactly. To resolve the agonizing cognitive dissonance of being surrounded by civilians who don't understand them, veterans using this strategy will fiercely denigrate the public.
They lash out.
They will label civilians as weak, shallow, selfish, or entirely incapable of understanding true sacrifice or the harsh realities of the world.
They build psychological armor. The internal monologue becomes, you don't understand me, you could never understand me, so I reject you completely.
It creates a rigid us versus them framing, and while it provides temporary protection against the civilian world that demands they play the silent hero, it is a tragic trap because it ultimately prevents healing.
It cuts them off.
It breeds chronic, toxic resentment and deepens their profound isolation. They become marooned on an island of their own trauma.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath, because this is heavy, but it is so necessary.
It is.
If demanding stoic heroism is destructive, and if the veteran bottling it all up behind psychological armor just breeds toxic resentment, how should a veteran or a first responder navigate this day?
We have to find a better way.
How do we actually fix this? And how should we, as civilians, support them without falling into the hero trap? This brings us to our final and most actionable section. We need to completely redefine resilience. We need to give people a clinical, biological toolkit.
We absolutely do, because the culturally ingrained Hollywood definition of resilience is actively destructive to long-term mental health.
You're talking about the myth of grit.
I am. In pop psychology, in sports, and especially in military culture, resilience is dangerously, almost universally conflated with grit.
And grit is.
Grit is the capacity to persevere through pain. It's the ability to pursue a goal relentlessly, to tough it out, to bottle it up, to maintain a stiff upper lip regardless of the emotional, physical, or moral cost.
And the report says we need to explicitly reject that definition. Why? If grit is the exact quality that gets a soldier through a grueling combat deployment or gets a first responder through a horrific 24-hour shift at a disaster site, why is it bad to use it on Memorial Day?
Because grit is a highly rigid short-term mechanism. It works beautifully for immediate, acute survival. If you are under fire, you need grit.
Right.
But applying grit to severe long-term trauma or moral injury simply suppresses the emotional and biological reality. It doesn't process the trauma, it just buries it alive.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Except it doesn't stay out of mind. And clinical neuroscience guarantees that unresolved suppressed trauma will eventually manifest somatically. You cannot hold your breath forever.
Yeah.
Eventually, the body forces you to inhale.
If you push it down into the body, it comes back later as an autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue, severe burnout, or explosive, unexplainable rage. As we said earlier, the body keeps the score, and it eventually collects the debt with interest.
Precisely. So we have to redefine clinical resilience. Resilience is not the absence of distress.
What is it then?
It is not the impossible, superhuman task of remaining perfectly calm and stoic while surrounded by a nation triggering your trauma. The human nervous system is specifically evolutionarily designed to respond to stress and danger.
Right.
Expecting it not to react is like expecting your knee not to jerk when a doctor taps it with a hammer.
So what is true resilience, clinically speaking, if it's not holding a straight face?
True clinical resilience is flexibility. It is the dynamic physiological capacity to experience severe adversity, to ride the intense wave of sympathetic activation, that massive fight or flight response we talked about, and then, crucially, to successfully downregulate the nervous system back to a baseline of parasympathetic balance.
Downregulate.
Returning to homeostasis, the rest and digest state. It is about cognitive flexibility, the ability to process the physiological weight of an experience without becoming permanently stuck in a threat response.
It's not about preventing the massive spike in your heart rate when the fireworks go off. It's about having the biological tools to bring your heart rate back down to normal afterward, rather than staying activated for a week.
Exactly. For veterans, resilience does not mean suppressing the urge to cry. It doesn't mean hiding a startle response when a parade cannon fires, or faking a smile for the sake of national pride.
So what does it mean?
True resilience means acknowledging the physiological activation, honoring the fact that the body is reacting appropriately to a massive trauma load, and using actionable somatic tools to return the nervous system to baseline.
And the report provides a fantastic step-by-step framework for this. It's called the ART model of resilience: acknowledgement, reframe, and tailoring.
A very effective model.
I want us to really take our time and walk the listener through this actionable somatic toolkit, because this is the stuff that actually saves lives. Step 1, acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement requires radical, uncomfortable honesty with oneself, no cognitive avoidance, no emotional suppression.
Just facing it.
The veteran must consciously, verbally acknowledge, "This date holds profound trauma for me. My body is actively preparing for a threat. I'm experiencing deep moral pain."
Why is that conscious, explicit acknowledgement so biologically important? Why can't they just try to distract themselves?
Because naming the experience physically alters the brain's operation. Conscious acknowledgement activates the prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking executive part of the brain.
The adults in the room.
Yes. When the prefrontal cortex comes online, it immediately begins to modulate and calm the amygdala-driven stress reactions. It prevents the amygdala from completely hijacking the autonomic nervous system.
So it puts the brakes on.
If you try to grit your teeth and simply ignore or distract yourself from the stress, the amygdala assumes you haven't noticed the danger, so it just fires harder and longer, leading to a massive toxic cortisol secretion.
Okay, so naming it tames it. You bring the adult in the room, the prefrontal cortex, online to calm the panicked child, the amygdala.
That's a great way to put it.
Step 2 of the RT model, reframe. Now, the report is very, very clear to draw a boundary here. This is not toxic positivity.
No, it has absolutely nothing to do with looking on the bright side or pretending trauma is a hidden blessing that made you stronger.
Right.
Clinical reframing is shifting the intellectual perception of your own physiological symptoms. Veterans often view their hypervigilance, their sweating, their panic on these days as a sign that they are fundamentally broken or weak.
Which just adds shame.
Reframing means actively recognizing those physical reactions as logical, highly adaptive responses that are just out of context.
So the internal monologue shifts. Instead of saying, I'm losing my mind, I'm weak, it becomes, my body's reacting this way because these exact reflexes, this exact hyper-awareness is what kept me and my mates alive in a war zone.
Yes.
It is not a weakness. It is an incredibly effective but outdated survival tool that I now need to actively manage.
Precisely. You remove the layer of shame from the physiological reaction. You honor the body's attempt to protect you.
That is so powerful.
Which brings us to the third part, which is the most actionable. Tailoring. This means moving away from generic platitudes, like just take a deep breath, and using specific, targeted somatic tools that fit the exact moment of distress.
And the most potent tool highlighted in the report is dual awareness.
Dual awareness, the ability to hold two realities in your mind at the exact same time.
Like having one foot in the past and one foot in the present.
Yes. Trauma has a gravitational pull. It pulls the mind entirely backward into the past, forcing you to relive the event.
Reliving it.
Conversely, dissociation zoning out entirely pulls the mind completely out of the body to escape the pain. Both leave you unanchored.
So what does dual awareness do?
Dual awareness is a clinical technique that forces the brain to process the past while remaining securely, physically anchored in the present moment. It prevents the memory from becoming a re-traumatization.
The report actually gives a specific clinical script for this. And if you are a veteran listening right now, or if you are someone supporting a veteran or a first responder, I want to read this directly because the mechanics of it are so practical.
Please do.
The first step is establishing the external anchor. The script says, I invite you to pause. Do not try to push the memory or the anger away. Let it exist. Now, explicitly bring your attention to the physical boundary of your body. Notice the absolute weight of your feet making contact with the floor. Feel the texture of the chair against your back. Name 3 specific neutral objects you can see in this room right now. What is the exact color of the wall?
Notice what that script is doing biologically. It forces the somatosensory system, the vestibular system we discussed, to register gravity now, not the distorted gravity of a past explosion.
So it grounds the body.
It forces the visual cortex to register the safety of the present room now. It creates a solid foundation.
Then the script shifts to the internal experience. Now, gently shift your attention inward. Notice the tightness in your chest, the rapid beating of your heart, or the specific memory that is arriving. Acknowledge the grief. You do not need to change it, fix it, or analyze it, just observe it.
And then comes the critical therapeutic maneuver, pendulation, shifting the focus back and forth.
Pendulation, okay, let me read the rest. Like adjusting the volume dial on a radio, shift your focus back to the sensation of your feet on the floor. Hold the feeling of the floor, while simultaneously allowing the memory to exist in the background. See if you can hold both the reality of the past inside and the physical safety of the present outside at the exact same time. If the internal memory becomes too heavy, dial it down and focus 100% of your attention on the external anchors until your heart rate steadies.
It's about giving the nervous system permission to process the weight, rather than pretending the weight isn't there, but doing it with a safety harness attached.
It is incredible. But what about when they are actually at the memorial service, standing in the crowd, and the triggers are happening in real time? The 21-gun salute goes off. The smell of diesel from a parade float drifts over the crowd.
That requires a tool called stimulus discrimination. The individual must actively, cognitively override the amygdala's panic signal.
Now,
They literally tell themselves, internally or even out loud, I am hearing gunfire, but I am standing in a civilian park in the year 2026. I am wearing civilian clothes, not body armor. The people around me are not combatants, they are families. I am not deployed. I am safe in this exact moment.
actively outlining the stark differences between then and now to prove to the primitive brain that the past is the past.
Exactly. And then dealing with the physical adrenaline rush through somatic release, because the adrenaline is still in the bloodstream.
The report talks about physically increasing vagal tone.
The vagus nerve is the superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system. It is the literal brake pedal for your fight or flight response, and you can stimulate it physically.
With the VU vocalization. Right?
Yes. The report suggests a technique involving the VU vocalization, taking a deep breath and making a low-frequency, resonant VU sound on the exhale.
VU.
Exactly. The low frequency physically vibrates the vocal cords, the diaphragm, and the organs of the torso, gently massaging the vagus nerve and mechanically downregulating the sympathetic nervous system.
It's hacking the nervous system through vibration.
It really is.
And the report also mentions bilateral stimulation.
Yes. Simple physical actions like alternating tapping on your left and right knees or mindful rhythmic walking. Engaging the left and right hemispheres of the brain in an alternating pattern helps the brain process stuck emotional energy and rapidly alleviates acute distress.
And finally, a tool that I think a lot of people, especially in military and first responder cultures, need explicit permission to use: tactical withdrawal.
Establishing a hard, non-negotiable boundary. If the collective weight of the dawn service, the inescapable media coverage, or the sheer size of the crowd becomes physiologically unmanageable, pushing through it with grit is the wrong move.
It's just digging the hole deeper.
It is clinically counterproductive. The most resilient, clinically sound action a person can take in that moment is to execute a tactical withdrawal. Leave the service early, turn off the television, go home.
Stopped out.
Choosing strategic isolation or limiting your exposure to only the exclusive company of trusted peers who understand in order to maintain your physiological homeostasis is a highly valid, profoundly protective strategy.
Leaving is an act of resilience. Admitting your limit is a victory, not a defeat. I love that.
It's crucial.
So let's zoom out and summarize this massive journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the pure, unforgiving biology of anniversary reactions. How the body, specifically the predictive coding of the amygdala and the vestibular system, physically braces for an impact from the past.
And physical anticipation.
We explored the crushing, paradoxical weight of collective grief, discovering how the synchronized public mourning that heals the civilian actively, biologically dysregulates the veteran.
The paradox of the parade.
Exactly. We dug deep into the vital, life-saving distinction between the fear-based circuitry of PTSD and the spiritual, guilt-ridden agony of moral injury.
A distinction everyone needs to learn.
And we confronted the trap of the hero narrative, recognizing that our well-meaning civilian praise often forces veterans to carry their darkest truths entirely alone.
The gag order.
Finally, we dismantled the toxic myth of grit, replacing it with the dynamic biological reality of somatic resilience and tools like dual awareness and tactical withdrawal.
And if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, It fundamentally changes the role of the civilian on these commemorative days.
What is our role then?
The civilian role is not to demand a performance of stoic patriotism. It is not to expect the veteran to be magically healed by a parade or a minute of silence. The civilian's job is simply to offer a safe, non-judgmental container for whatever reality the veteran is experiencing, whether that is profound grief, simmering rage, total silence, or the need for a sudden tactical withdrawal.
We just need to hold the space. Don't force the hero label, just hold the space.
Just hold it.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to take with you. Because as we wrap up this deep dive, examining the profound ways the body keeps the score of trauma, it points toward a lingering, highly provocative question, one that wasn't mentioned in the report, but that biology demands we ask.
Yes. If trauma is so deeply encoded into the physical structure of the survivor, if the vestibular system alters its perception of gravity and the HPA axis permanently changes its cortisol baselines, what happens to the next generation?
Wow.
We are just beginning to understand the science of epigenetic inheritance. Is it possible that the biological anticipation of these anniversaries, that deep somatic bracing for impact, is actually being written into the DNA and passed down?
Passed down to the kids.
Are the children and grandchildren of veterans unknowingly inheriting the somatic shadow of a war they never fought, feeling the hypervigilance of an anniversary their conscious minds don't even recognize?
We started today talking about how medical diagnoses are usually clean, simple, and binary, broken or not broken.
Yeah.
But trauma, memory, and the immense weight of collective grief.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate diagnostic muddy water. The injury isn't just a memory. It is woven into the nervous system. It alters the time-stamping of the brain, and it tears at the moral tissue of the soul.
It does.
Healing doesn't come from forcing a smile, pretending the water is clear, or demanding heroism. Healing begins when we finally radically acknowledge just how deep and how dark that water really is. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We will catch you next time.
It's the strength to build anew. It's the light to guide you through. It's the choice to find your way. Starting here, starting today.
We are going to wrap it up there for today. If you take one thing away from this episode, let it be the clinical reality of collective grief. For the veterans and first responders listening, your hypervigilance leading up to ANZAC Day is not a weakness. It is a biological reaction to moral injury and physical memory. Your nervous system is keeping the score. For everyone else, remember that true resilience is not about bottling it up or pretending the weight is not there. It is about having the capacity to carry that weight and regulate your body in the present moment. Honor the past, but stay physically grounded in the reality of today. If you are struggling to regulate your nervous system this week, the frameworks are ready for you. Head over to yourtools.com or open the app. You do not have to navigate this completely alone. Be kind to yourself. You are doing better than you think, and I'll catch you on your journey.